Mr. Speaker, today I rise to introduce an amendment to strike Section 165 from the underlying bill. Section 165 states that no funds in this or any other act may be available for light or heavy rail project in Houston, Texas, if the route goes through Richmond or down Post Oak Blvd. This language is contrary to the will of the voters of Harris County, Texas, and should not be included in this federal government appropriations bill. Houstonians voted in support of new transportation options for the Houston area in a local referendum in 2003. Now, some disagree with the results of that referendum, but local voters have made their decision, and I rise to support their right to make these decisions in Houston, Texas, and in local elections without the interference of Congress. If the federal government has the right to overrule a local election and referendum, then what is next? Blocking federal funds via obscure riders in appropriation bills in order to try and steer routing decisions is wrong. It is an inappropriate overreach by the federal government. It violates the will of the voters of Harris County and ultimately hurts the city of Houston, Texas. For members outside of Texas that may be unfamiliar with this debate, the precedent that this language will set, if followed, to remain in the bill is far-reaching and will affect more than just Texas. Passage of this language as is means that local votes just don't matter to Congress, that local officials don't really decide transportation matters in each state and cities because these decisions can be toyed with and overruled by Congress. This language is also bad policy. It is a throwback to the old Houston when our only transportation plan was to build more highways as far as the eye can see and block attempt to do anything else. Houston is one of the most expansive and efficient highway systems in the world, and with soon to be completed the Grand Parkway, the system will be even better. But we can only build so many roads. We can only build so many concrete monstrosities like the I-10 West corridor. Over 130,000 people moved to Harris County last year. That's as many as in Charleston, South Carolina. And an estimated another 150,000 will move to Harris County next year. Houston will soon be the third largest city in the country, overtaking Chicago. And with this increasing population, we need solutions for transportation, not attempts to stonewall all options from Washington. The debate that we are having on the floor is not about whether or not Metro is doing a good job or even about Metro. We know that Metro's had its fair share of problems over the years. It must get its financial house in order. It must become efficient, and it also must get the credibility it needs from the voters once again. But it's not our job to debate that local issue in Congress. The voters in a local referendum made that decision 11 years ago. It's inappropriate misuse of authority to divert money away from Houston because the federal government disagrees with the outcome of the local elections. As the saying goes, we need to let Texans run Texas. These decisions should not be made or should be made at the local level. Supporters of this language may try to argue that this is an attempt at fiscal responsibility. That is nonsense. This money is already appropriated for Houston. If Houston doesn't use it, it's not going back into the coffers. It's not going to pay down the national debt. The money's going to some other city that will take the money. And the idea that we will not take available transportation money to Houston sets a bad precedent for Houston. Because next time Houston wants some federal money, which is taxpayer money, that we may not be so fortunate to get that money because the folks up here said, well, we offered you money once before and you didn't take it. No more money for transportation. Houston is a donor state. 91% of the funds that we send up here, that's all that we get back. We don't get the other 9%. This is about the availability of transportation money to Houston, Texas. The underlying bill prohibits that money because of certain factors in the Houston area that don't like the outcome of this election and don't like light rail. Debate that issue in the city. Let city officials make that decision. Make those make that decision. Let there be a lively debate among the citizens that are affected by light rail. But don't let Congress come in and overrule the will of the people of Houston, Texas, an election that they had 11 years ago to accept federal funding when it's appropriate for us to take it. And that's just the way it is. I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I rise in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, in years to come, when history books look back and ask the question why America went bankrupt, they're going to look at my colleague Ted Poe's amendment as Exhibit A. It's very unfortunate that my friend and fellow Texan, Mr. Poe, who has until today portrayed himself as a fiscal conservative, would offer an amendment to force the people of my district to spend money we don't have on a project we don't want, that is unaffordable, unnecessary, and unapproved by the voters. These are my constituents, and it has no effect on Mr. Poe's district nor anyone else's district. No, I will not.
Will the gentleman yield to a question?
This does not affect your district.
It affects my district as well.
It does not affect your district. The amendment is very narrowly drawn, Mr. Speaker, so that it only affects my district. I wrote this amendment because it says that no money can be spent on rail in my district. In the boundaries of District 7, which is west of Shepherd on Richmond, and on Post Oak, north of Richmond. South Post Oak, those lines are entirely in my district. The people of my district, I've polled them, oppose this line. 80% of the folks that own property or live or work on those two streets don't want it. The voters did not approve the line on Richmond. It was not on the ballot. The people on Post Oak do not want it. It will destroy the Galleria. Mr. Poe is advocating for the construction of rail on Richmond and Post Oak, which will destroy those two streets. These lines are not approved by the Richmond line is not approved by the voters. The Post Oak line will destroy that area. Houston Metro has no money to build it. They can't afford it. There's no money in this bill or any other bill to pay for these lines. The local voters have said in this election, in fact, the lines that have been approved by the voters, Metro is building a rail line on the east side of town, which I support because the voters approved it. Metro, our local transit authority, Mr. Speaker, is spending $3,000 an inch to build a rail line on the east side of Houston. This is a waste of money we simply cannot afford, and that's why the Citizens Against Government Waste opposes Mr. Poe's amendment. Americans for Tax Reform opposes Mr. Poe's amendment. The National Taxpayers Union opposes Mr. Poe's amendment. The Club for Growth opposes Mr. Poe's amendment because it's amendments like this, attempting to force us to spend money we don't have on projects we don't want that are completely unnecessary, that the voters did not approve, that are going to bankrupt this nation. Imagine if you did not want to build a pool in your backyard, but your next door neighbor had the deed restrictions changed to force you to build a pool in your backyard. That's exactly what this amendment is. This amendment affects only my district. I have done my job as their representative to protect my constituents' quality of life, to protect their pocketbook against a rail line that we cannot afford and that nobody wants and that the voters did not approve. And that's why I'm proud to have the help of supported Chairman Latham, the ranking member, Mr. Pastor, the Americans for Tax Reform, the National Taxpayers Union and Club for Growth, Citizens Government Waste are all in opposition to this amendment, as are the people that I represent. And I'm very disappointed and disheartened that my friend Mr. Poe would stand up and offer this amendment and call the Katy Freeway a concrete monstrosity. Katy Freeway is my pride and joy. That's the first thing I did when I got elected to Congress, to get the Katy Freeway built without a single earmark, without any new federal money. Got it built in 5 years and 3 months, went from 8 lanes to 22 lanes, and the economic growth on the west side has bloomed because of the Katy Freeway. And that freeway is moving more cars in less time at more savings to taxpayers than any other transportation project in the history of Houston. I'm proud of the Katy Freeway, immensely proud to represent my district, and this amendment, the language in the bill, affects only my district in complete conformity with the voters' decision in 2003. And I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing Mr. Poe's amendment and voting no. And I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for joining me in opposition to this amendment. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker,
The gentleman from Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce a letter from the North Montrose Civic Association, the Greater Houston Partnership, Upper Kirby Management Association, the Transportation Advocacy Group of Houston Region, the Women in Transportation, the letter from the Mayor's Office, the Washington Avenue Improvement Committee, Houston Tomorrow, and other letters that I have received in support of my amendment to allow these federal funds.
The gentleman's request is covered by general leave.
Thank the gentleman.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.